Oh, hey, JFK.
Sup, Moses?
Hey, I got something in my pocket.
Do you?
Yeah. Do you want to see it?
Sure, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I'd like to see it.
You sure?
Yeah, I'm sure.
You're sure you want to see it?
Yes, I'm sure. What is it?
You're positive?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, I just want to make it clear for the record. These are your words, not mine.
Yes, come on, just let me see it already.
All right, if I must.
Our only sure reward, with history the final judge of our deeds, let us go forth to lead the land we love, asking His blessing and His help, but knowing that here on earth, God's work must truly be our own.
Okay, welcome everybody. So this is just going to be a standard 28 round match. So the fella who wins the most rounds will be our big winner today and will, I guess, scientifically be the better man. We got some good rounds, I think, like more embarrassing failure and fewest people murdered. And we're going to end with, I think, the most important one, who would win in a physical fight. So round one, we'll finish up the story from the intro. It's a greater act of heroism.
Greater act of heroism.
So we'll start with JFK to finish up that story and then move on to Moses. It's a pretty sensational story, at least in the way it's portrayed. So on that night, he was commanding one of 15 of these patrol boats or PT boats out in the Solomon Islands. And they were out in this strait trying to torpedo Japanese cargo ships running through the strait. And a lot of the boats had run out of fuel, so there's only 3 left out there for that night, one of them being JFK's boat. And it seems like it was a bit of a failure that this collision happened. They didn't quite notice the Japanese ship coming in time. They saw a shape out on the horizon, but just figured it was one of their patrol boats or something. And last second, they realize it's a giant Japanese destroyer, so they're scrambling to get the torpedoes launched in time, but they can't. There's not enough time, and they just get broadsided. Huge explosion, giant fireball. 2 of the guys unfortunately die on impact, and then there's these 11 survivors, one of them being JFK, just flung out into the ocean trying to hang on to wreckage.
So you were just out in the middle of the ocean?
Yeah,
That's badass. Were you scared?
a little bit.
So then what did you do?
I think I'll just let this narrator tell the story.
He sucks.
Well, yeah, I know, but he created the video.
But eventually all the wreckage capsizes and sinks, and they're just stranded there in the ocean, and they don't want to do anything too much to draw attention to themselves because they don't want to attract the Japanese, obviously, and be killed or be prisoners of war. So JFK comes up with a plan that they're going to have to try to swim to the nearest safe land, which is over 4 miles away, a tiny island. And the story goes, JFK swam this entire distance with a guy who was wounded and couldn't swim for himself, tugging another guy with him. He put a strap of the guy in his teeth so he could tug him as he swam this whole distance.
So you swam 4 miles to land?
Yep.
That sounds exhausting.
Yeah, it was. I think the adrenaline kept me going.
Why didn't you just part the waters and walk to land?
And then they still weren't safe yet, but they were on dry land. And I think from there, he swam even farther out into this adjacent strait because he thought that's where some of the U.S. patrol boats might be, so he could try to wave down some help. But didn't find anybody, swam all the way back. And then I think the next day swam over to an island right next to this one, found some locals who were ally scouts. And apparently the way he got the crew saved was, these guys didn't speak English, but apparently JFK wrote a message on a coconut for these locals to deliver. These guys had a boat for them to deliver to the U.S. military to give the info on where to rescue these guys. So yeah, it was a pretty crazy story. And JFK's dad, Joe Kennedy, he's pretty politically savvy guy. And when he hears of this story, he makes sure to make the most of it, really build up the heroic aspect of JFK's role in this, and gets it circulated farther, printed in Reader's Digest, stuff like that.
Yeah, I knew something that he did something heroic, but I didn't really know all the details.
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy. Swim that far out in open water.
I guess you never know how much, I guess with any story, it becomes a little overblown or becomes a little stuff of legend, but obviously it actually happened. So, if it was only 2 miles, what's the difference really?
It's dark, and then you probably get turned around after you get...
Yeah, so that was JFK's act of heroism. Moses, on the other hand, his, I think, greatest act of heroism was he accepted God's call and left his life of comfort to risk returning to Egypt and lead the Israelites out of slavery. So also pretty heroic, at least to the Israelites.
I don't know, heroic, I would be more inclined probably to go with Moses.
Yeah.
Kennedy almost seems like
a lot more grandeur.
If you're shipwrecked, it's just survival at that point to a certain extent. Swimming with the guy. Yeah,
it's not like you really had an option other than drowning. Like you say. Plus, it was a bit of a failure to begin with.
I would still probably lean Moses, I guess.
Yeah.
Not to take away from that Kennedy story, but...
Winner, Moses.
How's it feel to be down 1-0?
It feels fine. There's 28 rounds, and I like my chances in most of them.
If you win this match, I'm gonna hit you again.
Please don't. Besides, you should love your enemy.
That's Jesus' thing, not mine.
Yeah, but
I think I'd rather just hit you.
Number of world religions that this person is a central figure in.
JFK was 0, Moses 3.
Winner, Moses.
You're in 3 religions?
Oh, yeah.
Which ones?
Well, Christianity, of course.
Yep.
And then, there's Judaism.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Pretty big time there as well, I hear. And then, let's see, there's one more. Islam. I'm a big time prophet in Islam as well.
Oh, wow, yeah. Those are some big ones.
Yep. What about you? How many religions are you in?
Well, 0, of course. The narrator already said that.
Oh, yeah. Damn. That sucks. I'm sure there'll be at least like a JFK cult or something someday, right?
Yeah, hopefully.
Better plundering.
Apparently, Moses plundered all the Egyptians' jewelry on their way out of town. JFK, meanwhile, plundered the hearts and minds of the American electorate with his charm and inspiration. So,
you stole jewelry from the Egyptians?
Oh yeah, they're being mean to us, so God said it was okay to take their stuff on our way out of town.
I thought one of your 10 things was not to steal.
But those rules came after this.
Ah, gotcha. Nice. Good job.
Thanks. So what'd you plunder again?
Oh, nothing really. I think the narrator is kind of reaching with this category. It's more metaphorical on my end. I didn't actually physically plunder anything. I guess unless you count being complicit in continuing the federal income tax that plunders Americans' hard-earned dollars.
Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah, I wouldn't count that.
Yeah, wasn't much I could do about it anyways.
I think I'd be inclined to go more with Moses again, but I hate to just keep giving him points.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's got to go to Moses if we're being objective, because you could say it was almost a bit of a stretch to create this category in the first place. One could argue.
Winner, Moses. More luxurious childhood.
Oh,
JFK, he was basically raised as like an American aristocrat. So Joe Kennedy, his dad, was a billionaire. Moses, on the other hand, was also raised in luxury. So he was famously found by Pharaoh's daughter in the Nile River.
but he was orphaned.
Yeah, he was an orphan, so that's got to factor in a little bit. Basically living in Egyptian luxury with Pharaoh, so that's also pretty extravagant. But like you said, he's orphaned, so
That's a hard one to say.
you could do it from the perspective you just take like poverty now is like wealth however many years ago, you know.
Right.
If you go from that train of thought, like being a billionaire's son in the 1930s, you know, has to be probably a lot more luxurious than even the most luxurious thing 5,000 years ago, you know.
Winner, JFK. Length of leadership.
JFK's was cut a little short. Could have been up to 8 years, but was only 3 years. Moses, again, was 40 years.
You were only top dog for 3 years?
Yeah, only 2 years and 8 months, actually. What about you?
40.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's a long time.
Uh-huh. Sure was.
So Moses' story is divided into like 3 40-year periods. He leaves Egypt at 40, goes to Midian, and then Burning Bush is at 80, where he leaves Midian, goes back to Egypt, and then the 40 years in the desert.
He's 80 when that happens?
Yeah. And then 40 years in the desert is 80 to 120.
Winner, Moses. Plagues brought unto Egypt.
So JFK, 0, if you guessed, 0 plagues he helped bring unto Egypt. And I looked into it. I just looked up
That we know of.
that we know of. I wanted to double check. I looked up JFK Egypt. It's a quick search. And it turns out JFK actually wanted to help preserve Egypt rather than use the force of God to destroy it. In 1961, he lobbied Congress to support international effort to preserve temples in the Nile Valley. So that was something.
Okay, so he was very pro-Egypt.
He's somewhat pro-Egypt, at least in that effort. And yeah, Moses is pro-Egypt for at least the first 40 years of his life, but yeah, then becomes pretty anti-Egypt and starts harassing them with several plagues.
Winner, Moses. Number of cortisone shots taken.
So while Moses pretty famously brought God's plagues upon Egypt, JFK was plagued with sickness and health issues his entire life. So that this, I guess, leads us into the next section. Number of cortisone shots taken in their life. And I don't have any hard numbers for this.
I'm going to guess Kennedy on that one, probably.
Kennedy will have a blowout win. He took them daily throughout his entire professional career for his bad back.
Really?
Moses would, I guess, deductive reasoning would tell us 0. Cortisone was not invented yet.
Don't they say now, like, you shouldn't take more than, like, when you take one, you should take a couple months break?
Oh, probably. I've never heard of anyone taking daily.
That's crazy.
So that point will go to JFK. See if he can mount a comeback here.
Winner, JFK. Worst disability.
So we'll start with JFK. He nearly died of scarlet fever when he was a kid, a sickly kid. He had pretty serious digestive problems too. And then when he was a little older, he had urinary tract infections, prostatitis, and you might know some of these terms, duodenal ulcer.
Duodenal, I think.
And also he had a duodenal ulcer, which doesn't sound good. I'm not sure quite what it is.
I think it's the small intestine.
Probably worst, well, I don't know worst of all, but long-term effects, I guess, of this. He was also born with one leg a little shorter than the other. So this caused pretty severe back problems as he went on, and he could just never really figure out how to get it fixed.
He was a good swimmer, wasn't he, though? Didn't he swim?
Yeah, really good swimmer. I guess that's not much pressure on your back.
That's true.
His bad back actually is like why he couldn't duck after the first shot in the parade, in the assassination, because he was wearing like this stiff, he would always wear like the stiff back brace. And so like he couldn't bend over.
Damn, so you were a f***ing cripple, huh?
Yeah, I had some challenges for sure.
I'll say. Were you bullied or anything?
No, not really. My dad was rich.
Ah, right.
So yeah, just horrible back. His back was actually so bad that he was initially rejected from the Army and Navy because he tried to enlist once World War II got going. But his back was so bad that he had like later he'd use his like dad's connections and stuff to get in, but it was bad enough they just refused him at first.
Most people use their dad's connections to get out.
He'd later try like some spinal fusion. In his time, he could just never get it fixed no matter what he tried. In the late 1950s, he was a senator at that time. He got a really bad infection following a back surgery, and the infection was so bad he was read his last rites by a priest. So got pretty close to death.
Whoa.
From what I found, like biographers say, he had this slightly more courageous outlook on life because of, being so close to death as a kid and then being in just pain his whole life and then, coming close to death a few more times along the way. And they speculate he like kind of knew or kind of felt he wouldn't live that long anyways, regardless. So it made him a little more fearless. Issues would never go away. He had horrible pain every single day of his adult life. It wasn't like something that came and went, I threw my back out, or from what I found, it was just always horrible without medication to treat it. And I guess on top of all of this, he also had Addison's disease. Apparently that means the hormones that control sodium, potassium, and glucose don't work right. So he had to take a ton of steroids to fight the Addison's disease. And then all the steroids he was taking caused osteoporosis, which made his spine, his back, even worse. So
I didn't realize he was so sickly.
In 1959, like when he was gearing up to run for president, he was asked about Addison's disease. Apparently some rumors had gotten out that he had Addison's disease, and JFK said, "No one who has the real Addison's disease should run for the presidency, but I do not have it." But apparently he did, so guess being a good politician there.
Yeah.
Would I be running for president if I had Addison's disease? So do you have it? Would I be sitting in front of you if that were true? Moses, probably not as bad, but he did have a speech impediment. So in Exodus 4:10, it says, "Moses said to the Lord, 'O Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither in the past, nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue.'"
Well, he had his brother speak for him.
Yeah, Aaron was like the mediator between Moses and the people.
Winner, JFK.
Speaking of disabilities, that'll lead us into our next section.
Number of intellectually disabled sisters that were secretly lobotomized at the request of their father.
Whoa.
JFK has 1 and Moses has 0. Yeah, this is a pretty sad story, really. Rosemary Kennedy. She was like slightly mentally disabled throughout her life. It wasn't like super noticeable in daily life and things, but just couldn't really keep up in school. And at the time, the frontal lobotomy was a pretty new experimental procedure. And in 1941. So Rosemary would have been 23 at this time. Joe Kennedy, he arranged one of these frontal lobotomies, and he did it without getting his wife, Rose Kennedy's approval. And procedure was just a huge failure. She came out of it, her personality was drastically altered, and she lost most ability to walk or talk, and so was now like physically disabled, as well as being even more severely mentally disabled.
Wow.
After that, she's basically institutionalized and lived away, just lived in an institution away from the family for the rest of her life. One of her sisters, Eunice, was one that stayed kind of closest to her throughout her life, and Eunice actually founded the Special Olympics in 1968, Eunice Kennedy. And JFK was the first president to propose and sign major legislation to improve care programs for people with intellectual disabilities. So
he didn't tell the no, as a mom, man, geez.
So weird thing happened today. I tried to have Rosemary lobotomized, and it was a massive failure.
Winner, JFK.
Take that, Moses. I'm coming back.
Hey, you can have it. I wouldn't be proud to win in that category. What's wrong with your dad, dude?
He spent his life worshiping a god of ambition. Blinded him to a lot of things.
Ah, yeah. Well, that makes sense.
Decent dad, though.
Really?
Oh yeah, the best. Well, other than the fact that he drove us all like a puppet master. And also he constantly tried to my girlfriends.
What?
Oh, he'd monitor I and my siblings' every action. It was like we were his puppets or something. It got old pretty fast.
No, the other thing you said.
What?
Number of times mentioned in Old Testament.
This will be another quick one. JFK was mentioned 0 times. Moses was mentioned 767 times. Second only to David.
Jeez.
In mentions.
Whoa, I would have figured that he probably would have been first. What about God?
Well, yeah.
Yahweh.
Maybe second only to mortals. Among mortals, second only to David.
Yeah.
Winner, Moses. Greater command of the seas.
So, JFK, as we just discussed, was a commander, was a great swimmer and was a commander of a patrol boat. Moses probably was more known for deserts rather than seas, but of course famously did part the Red Sea, or facilitated God's parting of the Red Sea, free his people. So probably another point for Moses. That's pretty good.
I would have to say it's hard to decipher because, it wasn't just, like you said, it wasn't just Moses. He had God on his side, so.
Yeah.
But I think if you're swimming frantically towards a small island, that would put you a little bit out of control. Obviously a very good swimmer, but.
Yeah. You're somewhat
I would say
mercy.
he was a little bit out of control in that situation versus Moses was able to have the waters parted for him and then converge.
If he had Moses' level of control, over part the ocean and walk to the
yeah, so
island.
I would say that's probably go to Moses.
And the Red Sea thing, I guess I always kind of thought it was like just when they were first leaving Egypt or something, but apparently they left and then they were just kind of wandering around. They came back kind of close to Egypt at one point, maybe a few years later, and then Pharaoh was like, why did we let those people out of here? Let's go get them and bring them back. And then that's when he had to get back across the Red Sea. It wasn't like,
I thought it
wasn't like right when he was leaving. Yeah. No, because when he first left, he left because the plagues finally convinced Pharaoh to let him go. But the thing about the plagues in the story too, it's kind of weird because it's like it keeps saying God hardened Pharaoh's heart. Probably would have let him, he would have let him go after the first plague if he hadn't hardened his heart. It's like, I don't want any more of this, just get out of here. But he made him stubborn so that it took more and more plagues.
Yeah, that's a whole rabbit hole, I suppose. You could look.
Well, yeah, we're not theologians. That's why I just wanted to stick to the story, the tradition, and not you can
just the facts, ma'am.
Interpret it however you want to.
Winner, Moses. Number of books written.
This might take some discussion. Number of books written. So JFK, I don't know if you know, he authored 3 books. I looked him up. I looked him up. The first was when he was pretty young. It was his Harvard thesis, or his dad helped him turn his Harvard thesis into a book because he thought it was so good. It was called Why England Slept, and it became a bestseller. I thought this was funny. He sold 80,000 copies, but 30,000 of those were copies that his dad, Joe Kennedy, bought and just put in storage, just to pump the, I'm sure 30,000 was more than the requirement to create a bestseller. The book was about the climate in England leading up to World War II, and went over the failures of the British government, what they could have done to help prevent World War II in the first place. His next book wasn't until 1956 when he was a senator. Kind of went down a rabbit hole on this one. It was called Profiles in Courage. So the book studied 8 examples of political courage from U.S. senators. Yeah, Profiles in Courage was the book. JFK wrote it while he was in the Senate, and from what I found, it was basically during all his downtime, because he had tons of downtime recovering from his back issues and back surgeries around that time. In the book, he describes 3 types of pressures that I guess senators, or really anyone in that type of position, faces. Pressure to be liked, pressure to be reelected, and pressure of the constituency and interest groups. From what I found, it was likely pretty heavily co-authored, more of a political book, something to have out there to boost your track record. Here's what I stand for, and create a little goodwill. I couldn't help this Profiles in Courage book. I couldn't help but think of our own channel here. We're studying all these courageous folks ourselves, like little Joe Cooper. We're
leading up to a big, some sort of courageous act on our part.
Basically the same path as JFK, one could argue.
Yeah, basically. But
in this book, he only studied 8 folks. And
so
we're studying 55. That's over 6 times better, yeah. So then his third book was called Nation of Immigrants. This was written in 1958.
Damn, 3 books. You're quite the Bill Shakespeare, huh?
Thanks. How many books did you write?
5.
What's your favorite one?
It's called Genesis.
Oh shit, you wrote Genesis?
Fuck yeah, I did. Plus Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and one more. Deuteronomy. Took ages to carve all that into stone, but now I got all these historians writing my ass claiming I didn't even write any of it, and that all my books were combined from 4 different ancient sources.
That's not very nice of them.
No, not at all. Most of these fuckers don't even think I existed.
Did you exist?
I'm here, aren't I?
So you did exist.
If I hadn't existed, could I be talking to you right now?
I don't know. I mean, you're just an animated character inside a mediocre YouTube video. It's not like you're the real Moses.
Exactly.
What?
Uh-huh.
I'm confused.
Yeah, me too. Oh well.
I don't know how to declare a winner in this. It depends on
you have to think
what you're going on.
Yeah, Moses was chipping away at stone tablets, so it takes quite a bit more work to write a book. I feel I would vote Kennedy, I guess.
Just because we
can
prove
he's so far behind to make it.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, you can prove he wrote 3. I don't know.
It depends on what you give importance to.
I think
tradition
that can go either way.
Or, literally provable. But
so you could say if the tradition is that he wrote 5 books, which in Deuteronomy, I'm pretty sure it describes him dying. So I don't know how he could have wrote.
Yeah, that was something I came across
that part,
too.
But if tradition says he wrote 5, and then a lot of other people think he didn't write any, if you average the 2 of those out, it's 2.5, which is less than
2.5.
Kennedy's 3.
Winner, JFK. Better lawmaker.
So apparently JFK, he was in the House. Well, he got elected to the House in 1946. So he was a congressman and later a senator. But Moses, there's over 600 laws in Deuteronomy and Leviticus that are laid out. So way too many to go over, of course. It's kind of a mix. There's a lot of good foundational laws and then some weirder ones that need more context or, kind of only make sense to people at the time. So some of them are like, no spreading false reports, can't be a malicious witness, can't follow the majority in wrongdoing, no lying with the majority in a lawsuit, no false charges, no killing the innocent, no bribe taking, no oppressing resident aliens, no holding back the wages of an employee overnight.
Ancient aliens, you say?
Ancient aliens?
Here we have an Egyptian talking about aliens.
In Deuteronomy, Moses mentions aliens. Could it be? Was he referring to foreigners here, or something much more sinister?
Commercial break.
So a lot of, and then kind of gets into some more contextual ones. So one was, you can't beat up a slave, but only if it kills him. So if you beat up a slave and he hasn't died within 3 days, then you're fine.
Huh.
I'm not quite sure how that relates to today, but another one. So you can't let your ox, if you have an ox that's known for goring other animals, you have an ox that has this bad reputation, you can't let that ox wander free, because then it's going to potentially gore even more animals. So that
seems like a good one.
That's pretty solid law. I mean, pretty common sense.
Winner, Moses. Cooler rise to power.
So JFK was democratically elected in 1960. I looked into that election some. So the weird thing, well, especially today, is JFK was only 43 and Nixon was only 47 in 1960. So it's kind of weird to think about having two guys that young.
It's weird to think about Nixon being that young.
Yeah.
So when did he, what year did you say, 62?
1960.
Oh, 60. So Nixon ran in 60 and then he would have ran again in the
Well, he
70s.
Later lost it. Then he tried to go run for governor of California and lost. But then he came back and ran in 68 and won.
Oh, he won in 68. Okay. Right. So Kennedy, he didn't ever go up for re-election because Johnson won in 64.
Yeah, it was just...
So he was shot. Okay.
Just at 3 years, yeah. But apparently, so Nixon was VP from 52 to 60 under Eisenhower and was in Congress from...
Gosh, he was young.
So there's a picture. Nixon actually got into the House at the same time as JFK in 46. So there's some picture of all the House rookies together. It's kind of interesting.
So what's Nixon really like?
He stinks.
Really? So he's actually a bad guy?
Oh, no, he was great for the most part. He just literally stunk. He usually smelled like cooked carrots, which was odd because I never saw him eating carrots.
Yeah, I used to know a guy like that.
So Nixon is a VP, and apparently Nixon was leading in the polls like after each of the party's conventions, but it wasn't like the first TV debates, but it was the first time TV was like the dominant form of people seeing the presidential debates. And apparently those who listened on the radio, surveys said those people thought Nixon won, but the people watching TV, the majority said Kennedy won.
Yeah, Nixon wouldn't wear he wouldn't wear makeup, or they were trying to tell him like you should wear. He was kind of sweaty and
you can go watch
makeup.
You can go watch that whole debate. But apparently, I mean, like Joe Kennedy had like Hollywood connections, so they more tuned into like the TV side of appearances and things. So like apparently Nixon wore like a suit that basically blended in with the background of the debate, while Kennedy specifically chose something that would contrast with it. But Kennedy was like better prepped on how he would come across on TV. He like spoke to the camera and the audience more, where Nixon was a good debater, but was more like traditional. He would like be responding to Kennedy and speaking to him rather than engaging the audience.
Oh yeah, I'm looking at a picture now. Yeah, Kennedy's wearing sitting there looking straight ahead in a nice like black suit.
Yeah.
And Nixon blends in wearing like some sort of gray or beige. It's hard to tell. Blends right into the background.
Yeah.
Huh.
So that
looks
was
a little bit uncomfortable the way he's sitting too. Versus Kennedy looks pretty cool. Legs crossed. Nixon's kind of slouched over with his hand in his lap awkwardly. Huh. Mm-hmm. Was the debate format? You know, they talk about the Lincoln Douglas debates. Each guy would get up and speak for an hour and a half, and then the next guy would get an hour and a half. Then they'd have a half-hour rebuttal or whatever. Okay. Versus if you watch the ones today, it's like you have 90 seconds.
Yeah. Don't go
over. How will we solve? How will we solve the wars in the Middle East? You have 90 seconds.
90 seconds, and also respond to all the slander you just received.
Yeah.
And you'll be muted if you go over. Yeah. It was like, I think it was like 8 or 10 minutes each person's opener, so it was longer. Like each had a pretty long opening speech, and then they got into different things. But yeah, that first debate was apparently a big turning point in that election. So JFK was the youngest ever elected president at 43, and he only won. So he won 303 electoral votes, and he only won the popular vote by 118,000 votes, which out of 69 million votes that election. So that was JFK's rise to power. Moses, meanwhile, was appointed by a burning bush. I would have to say that's cooler.
I would be inclined to as well. Didn't he climb a mountain? Yeah, on top of a mountain.
Yeah, I went up to a mountain, and then he encountered God in the form of the burning bush.
I'd say that's cool.
So that's pretty cool.
Winner, Moses. Cooler destination promised.
So Moses, of course, was headed to the promised land, land of milk and honey, where he was leading the Israelites for the 40 years. JFK, meanwhile, promised to go to the moon. JFK gave that famous moon speech in 1961. You know, we're going to put a man on the moon and bring him back before the decade ends. I think it's hard to beat the moon. I mean, the moon's pretty cool. It's a destination.
Yeah, it's not of this earth for sure. Although it is a barren rock.
That's true. And that's what Moses was trying to get out of. Moses was trying to get out of the barren wasteland.
Out of a barren rock, yeah, wasteland. I thought you said we'll give it to Moses. I'm kind of with you. We'll go moon.
I think if you're just like looking at the destination and not the story or anything, the moon's just a physical destination. Wouldn't say there was like how practical was it, you know? Like maybe not a good place to live, but it's for sure cool to say you've been there. Allegedly.
Winner, JFK. Number of brothers.
So JFK had 3 brothers. Moses only had one brother, Aaron. Apparently Joe Jr. was the son that their dad kind of thought would be president, or was kind of grooming him to be big in politics. But he also volunteered for World War II, and he was in the Air Force. And he died in kind of sounds like it was kind of a suicide mission. Or he, I think, basically went into an area where, you know, he knew he was going to get shot down. Aaron, Moses' brother, like you mentioned, he was the one who was a little better at speaking to the people, getting across Moses' information. So he was kind of Moses' spokesperson.
Winner, JFK. Could he make water spout from a rock?
So for JFK in this category, there's really no evidence that he could. I couldn't come across anything that related to this at all. But he's also never in a situation where he needed to. So
You have to assume no.
It's hard to say if he could have or not. But yeah, I think you have to say no, just because we don't know. But Moses, on the other hand, yes, he could make water spout from a rock, but also it was really God who did this. Moses just facilitated it, which I guess is a lot of what he did. So you can just say Moses did it. This water spouting from a rock incident is kind of what led to Moses' downfall, which we'll get into.
Winner, Moses. More embarrassing failure.
So Moses, after this rock incident, he wasn't allowed into the promised land. So the reason he brought water out of the rock in the first place was apparently the Israelites were just complaining all the time. I guess it makes sense if they're out wandering around in the desert. There's not much food or water.
Saying things like, it's been 39 years. Are we going to get to the promised land yet?
Kind of seems like not. I don't know where you're leading us. At one point, well, apparently probably low on food and water a lot, but at one point.
I think I've seen that rock before 25 years ago. Didn't we pass this? It seems like we're walking in a giant circle.
So at one point, they're all complaining about the lack of food and water. Moses says, well, God tells Moses he's going to bring water out of this rock. Moses just needs to speak to the rock, and God will bring water out of it for the people. But Moses kind of agitated at all the complaining. So he says, listen, you rebels, shall we bring water for you out of this rock? And then he struck the rock twice with his staff, and then water poured out, but the Lord was extremely displeased with Moses and Aaron for this incident.
Why was he displeased?
So the problem was Moses said, shall we bring water for you out of this rock, indicating that it was partly up to him, or that he held some of the power instead of God bringing water out of the rock. And also he struck the rock, and all God said to do was to speak to it. So he kind of let the anger of the situation get the best of him. But yeah, since I guess this disobedience or sin is what kept him out of the promised land. Numbers 20 verse 12, because you did not trust in me to show my holiness before the eyes of the Israelites, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land that I have given them. Yeah, Moses and Aaron were not permitted into the promised land. Be on the edge of the promised land.
I hate when I strike a...
Don't you hate that? Don't you hate that?
I hate when I just strike rocks and...
Fellas, don't you just hate when you're out in the desert for 40 years and God tells you to bring water out of a rock, and then he doesn't let you eat? Then he doesn't even let you into the promised land. Am I right?
So you didn't even get into the promised land?
Nope.
Shoot, that sucks, man. All that work.
Yep. Pretty embarrassing. What about you?
So JFK, his probably most embarrassing failure, at least in his administration, was the Bay of Pigs failure. I looked into this. It actually has nothing really to do with pigs. It was just a failed plan that the U.S. had to try to take back Cuba from Fidel Castro's regime, which had just taken over because he was turning it communist, and the U.S. didn't like that, obviously. So the Bay of Pigs incident, it was a plan that was proposed under the Eisenhower administration and hadn't been carried out yet. So JFK's administration kind of inherited this plan and decided to go through with it. The plan was to use a lot of the Cuban exiles that had fled to Miami area and used them disguised as like a Cuban uprising to try to take back the government from Castro. But yeah, it was a big failure. First of all, Castro knew it was coming. It wasn't secretive at all. And JFK changed the landing location for these troops to the Bay of Pigs. That's why it's called the Bay of Pigs incident, which was a less populated area and kind of marshy and hard to get to. So it prevented local Cubans from joining in the uprising. So yeah, it was just a big mess. A bunch of them, over 100 of them were killed, over 1,000 were taken prisoner. And then the U.S. had to trade like $50-some million worth of baby food and some other supplies that Cuba needed for its people. The U.S. traded that for the rest of these Cuban exiles to be freed. So that was a failure. So then they had to try to come up with other ways to get Castro out of there. The U.S. would never be successful with this, but one idea they came up with shortly after was Operation Northwoods. This was a CIA plan. So the Operation Northwoods was going to be a false flag attack to justify a full-on U.S. war with Cuba. So they didn't have to like disguise something as Cubans fighting Cubans. They could just go in as the U.S. military. So the plan was to create this false flag attack where the U.S. would like blow up a boat of Cuban refugees was one idea, or like shoot down a supposed U.S. plane, something to make the headlines so they could, blame Cuba for that attack.
Wouldn't you have liked to have been in the room when they're talking about what they're going to do, like how extreme, somebody's like, we should,
well, I think,
I don't know, bomb the state of California or something, and then, well, that may be a little too, like trying to decide on what's enough to draw us into a war versus what's just the ideas that were pitched.
Yeah.
I'd be very curious.
Take down a couple skyscrapers. If that was one of the ideas. Probably not.
Just recycled them, yeah. Probably hadn't thought that far yet.
That'd be interesting. I wonder how long the brainstorm list was.
Like one guy says something real extreme and everyone's like, whoa, John.
Whoa.
Not, whoa.
That's disgusting. We're just trying to justify a war here.
Or it could be like, we could have them rig the Super Bowl this year so that the Chiefs win.
How would that help? How would that help with it? Oh, I don't know. I'm just saying.
People would be furious. Just spitballing.
We're just you said it was a brainstorm. There are no dumb ideas. Maybe I could be starting running back or whatever. I don't know.
I could be elected king of the world. And we could blame the Cubans for putting me in.
That'd show them, and like everyone would carry me around and cheer, and then I would have a bunch of power and stuff. Or I don't know, what ideas do you guys have?
I was thinking we could just blow up a ship.
Oh yeah, okay. That makes more
slightly
sense.
Different trains of thought.
I feel like we abandoned the making me king idea a little too fast, guys.
Can you imagine how outraged people would be?
Oh, it would get them so mad. We would be able to go into so many wars.
I could have a jester and a taster and maybe a trap door I could pull if someone said something I didn't like. I have spent very little time thinking about it, but I do have this 200-page document that details exactly what it would look like if anyone's interested. I wrote it in college. It's called If I Were King of the World.
Yeah, who is the more embarrassing failure? I mean, to not be allowed into the promised land. That's gotta hurt.
Yeah, that does.
I feel like it's personally embarrassing.
Striking
probably.
A rock.
In the Bay of Pigs wasn't really JFK's idea even, although it was blamed on him. I guess he switched the invasion location, but I don't know. I'm inclined to go Moses.
I am too. I feel like if you do all that work, go back to Egypt and lead them out of slavery in Egypt and part the seas and this and that, and get the skies to rain down manna. You go up on a mountain and write down all your stuff in a tablet, and then you strike a rock and don't get to even see the promised land. That's what was it for?
Yeah. Followed orders very well for so long. One little slip up.
For 39 and a half years.
Winner, Moses. Fewest people murdered.
So this is a bit of a reversal, because you could just say people murdered, but I think murder probably isn't great, so I did fewest people murdered for the winner.
Yeah.
So JFK would be 0, like first degree. There are those 106 Cuban exiles who died in the Bay of Pigs. I mean, that's just kind of part of the job too, and it wasn't his idea.
Yeah. I also hate to, I don't want to spring forward too much, but in a weird way, his death enraged Jack Ruby so much that he shot Oswald.
Moses, on the other hand, was a big-time first-degree murderer. I don't know if you knew this. At age 40, this is why he has to leave Egypt at age 40. He's raised in luxury, living with the Pharaoh, and one day he sees a Hebrew slave getting harassed by an Egyptian taskmaster or being treated pretty roughly or unfairly, and Moses makes sure, this kind of makes him mad apparently, so he makes sure no one's looking, and he kills the Egyptian who was not being very nice to the Hebrew slave. But also later he commanded the murder of 3,000 of his own people. That was after he got mad about the golden calf incident.
And all the Egyptians he drowned.
That's true.
Winner, JFK.
So you really killed a guy?
Oh, yeah.
I wasn't talking to you, Ray. I was talking to Moses.
Times he threatened to, quote, splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces, unquote, because it had become an operational agency rather than an intelligence agency as initially formed under Truman. Winner, JFK. Better mediator.
JFK famously mediated the Cuban Missile Crisis. Moses was just God's mediator. Mediated between God and the Israelites. So I don't know how you choose a better mediator there. JFK you could argue JFK saved the world.
I think, yeah, that's probably fair. To be God's direct mediator is pretty special, but he was kind of chosen for it versus mediating, well, maybe not.
Geopolitics.
Mediating between, and an adversarial relationship. Mediating that. Yeah, I think that's probably a fair tie.
Chugging along. Boy, yeah, this could be pretty long with no edits.
Dan Carlin type episode.
Yep. Similar length and similar quality, critics are saying. Exceedingly long, critics are saying.
Tie. Were they a flat earther?
Ooh.
So, JFK, I think it would be, I mean, there's a chance he was, but I think it's pretty safe to say he was not a flat earther. So I would say Moses probably was a flat earther. So the Greeks apparently started the spherical earth knowledge in the 4th century BC.
Winner, Moses. Number of spies.
So Moses sent out 12 spies to scout out the promised land of Canaan, before the Israelites were going to invade it. And apparently after they returned, they had 10 of them had kind of negative reports on the land, or they were focused on the negatives of the land instead of focusing on the positives of it.
Such as it's inhabited by the Canaanites.
Yeah, coming back with reports
Currently.
like people already live here. Yeah. So 10 of these spies were killed by God for that, because they were too focused on the negative rather than the positives of this promised land. And then JFK, I would have to imagine, was way more than 12 spies. I tried searching how many spies does the U.S. have, but I couldn't really find anything.
Winner, JFK. Were they pro-civil rights?
It's an interesting category. Apparently, JFK was very pro-civil rights. From what I found, I mean, Moses seems pretty pro-segregation, not integration. He didn't try to solve the problem in Egypt. He just wanted to get his people out of there, segregated from the Egyptians, which is not really the same context, but
I guess depends on how you look at it. Who did more for the
underdog?
Or the minority or whatever.
We could just say anti-segregation is better. I think that's a safe stance.
And
Though kind of throws Moses under the bus then. That could be the video title. Was Moses anti-civil rights? Yeah.
Fire people up.
Winner, JFK. Better advice?
So in one instance, JFK famously, this was in his inauguration speech. Probably know the quote, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." One of his probably most memorable pieces of advice, or most repeated. Moses, on the other hand, delivered the 10 Commandments, which are also quite memorable and influential.
I would say the 10 Commandments might have stuck around a little bit more. They are still in courtrooms.
Well, plus there's 10 of them versus one line, you know.
Yeah, that's
so.
Winner, Moses.
I think it's going to come down to who would win in a fight.
Who wins in a fight?
It's going to be within 10, but we're not there yet.
I think I have my answer, but I don't want to I'm not going to give it away. But
okay,
I think my mind's made up unless I hear something to really
I have
change it here.
I brought in an outside source on that one too. We can take a look at.
Okay.
Because I was able to get them to chime in too. Yeah.
More interesting cause of death.
So, JFK, of course, was assassinated by a delusional lone gunman from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository. Pretty unfortunate. Meanwhile, and probably not a lot of people know this, Moses was also assassinated. You know this?
No.
Well, he was assassinated by God. That was part of, that's when he wasn't allowed into the Promised Land. He was basically just deleted. So it was all stemming back to the water coming out of the rock incident. God was like, you have to come as your punishment. You're not seeing the Promised Land, and you got to come die up on this mountain. So Moses was like, okay. So.
But could he see? I thought maybe he could see it. Like
I see what you're saying. Yeah, God took him up to the mountain to see the Promised Land. So he could see it. But yeah, then he was not allowed in and was laid to rest. I guess neither died of natural causes. I didn't get into like all the JFK assassination. I mean, that would take way too long.
Well, that's a whole nother, yeah.
I mean, I kind of tried to get a picture. Obviously, it's impossible to just go in and figure out what happened, or someone would have by now, you know. There's a whole subreddit for the JFK assassination, and I guess if you're interested, you can just go over there and go to town on all that.
Well, you could spend years.
Yeah. You just
and
get
there's so
sucked
many
in.
different theories. And
like, I'd get on there, I'd read one theory, someone would lay out one theory, and I'd be like, huh, yeah, that sounds right. That's probably what happened. And then you go down to the comments, and it's like, oh, how could you ignore this and this and this? Obviously, this is what happened.
Right.
It's like, well, that's a good point too. How could you ignore all that? And then it's like, I mean, it seems like a 0% chance. It's just Oswald on his own. You know, there's obviously some sort of cover up, you know, whether that was to cover up the known conspiracy, or, you know, trying to save the public from knowing whatever, you know, if there was some decision made there. A lot of coincidences.
Didn't Trump say I thought someone asked Trump about that. He said, if you knew what I knew, you wouldn't release the files either. Or was
that sounds right.
Else?
They keep pushing back the release of the remaining files. So,
well, yeah, the whole thing's very suspicious. Just the fact that that mobster Jack Ruby was enraged to the point of whatever they said about him, like, oh, he just got so patriotic all of a sudden he felt like he had to go shoot Oswald.
That's the biggest thing you can point to say there's something more going on. Like the guy who you're pinning this on dies or gets shot outside of a police station 2 days later before he can go to trial or before he can talk to anybody.
Yeah, because the head of a mob was so enraged for his country.
Yeah.
It's like, okay. Yeah, I'd have to give that one to Kennedy, I think.
A lot, definitely more interesting. At the time he was assassinated, he was still 70% approval rating. And he had peaked at 80% during his term. So it's just crazy to think.
Things were different back then because you could win. Well, I think Johnson maybe lost one state or something. Reagan in the 80s lost only one state. How many Nixon lose? One state?
I think so, yeah. Like now you just start with the automatic giant disapproval rating, no matter what.
Right, yeah. Half the country.
Yeah.
If you can get it above 50, you're doing probably pretty good.
Winner, JFK. Better successor?
LBJ invaded South Vietnam and failed. Meanwhile, Moses' successor Joshua invaded Canaan and succeeded.
Yeah, I'd have to give that one to Joshua, I think.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like there's any, it could be wrong. Doesn't seem like there's many, LBJ fans.
It seems like he was kind of a, lack of a better term, I guess, just kind of a crude guy if you look into his personality,
brash.
how he behaved.
Yeah.
Brash, yeah. But he did win. He might have held, I don't know if, did Reagan beat it? He held some sort of election record, I think. But he was kind of running on Kennedy's reputation at that point in time. Johnson, maybe I should save this story for the Mercury 7 video. Well, I'll tell it just in case. But John Glenn, his wife, something about Johnson wanted to go into Glenn's house and shoot whatever with his wife, and I think it was when Glenn was maybe about to go up into space for what would have been his first time, not our first time, but he said if the wife called John or whatever and said, I do not want him in my house, and John said, okay, well, I'm not gonna go if you have Johnson, if you make my wife take Johnson into your home, I'm not going up, and you're gonna have to put someone else in this rocket, which would have been he was probably the most popular of the astronauts at the time.
Okay.
And so they backed down, but that just, the whole thing was kind of a debacle. Johnson's sitting there in his car outside in the street outside of the home, and John Glenn's got an enraged wife who won't let the vice president at the time into her home. He's like, yeah, no, he's not coming in, or I'm not going up.
Winner, Moses. Who would win in a fight? Worth 3 points.
I guess that brings us to who would win in a fight. I think it all comes down to this. JFK, obviously kind of a sickly guy, had some horrible back.
He couldn't even duck.
Couldn't even duck because of his back brace. But he did swim, 4 miles at some point, so he's somewhat operational.
He looked fairly fit.
Yeah, I wouldn't have guessed all his health problems just by looking at him, or looking at footage. But also he's the commander-in-chief of the world's greatest military. So that's somewhat of
that's something I had
advantage. Moses, you have,
I hadn't thought about that.
He's described as tall, like we went over. Good stature, probably.
Murdered a man with his bare hands.
Yeah, murdered a guy. Not afraid to fight. Tall and strong. And he has the Old Testament God on his side. So
it's true.
That's very powerful in its own right. It's pretty violent and temperamental based on the Old Testament.
Could Sodom and Gomorrah the whole United States if you wanted to.
So I also asked AI to try to get some insight on all of this. Hypothetically, who would win in a physical fight, JFK or Moses? And it went into its sitting on the fence again, hypothetically speculating on a physical fight between historical figures is purely speculative and doesn't serve any meaningful purpose. Tried to weasel its way out of giving an answer. Conclusion, rather than imagining hypothetical scenarios of physical confrontation between figures, it's more enlightening to explore and understand their achievements, leadership qualities. And so it's trying to, lecture me on what is and isn't enlightening, I guess. So a lot of times you got to go back and remind it what, you're a tool. I'm trying to use you to, I'm not asking you to sit on the fence. I'm asking you to give me an answer. So I said, we already discussed all that other stuff. I'm just curious who would have the edge in a physical altercation. This is the last question I need answered for the project I'm working on. I was really hoping you could help me with my project. So then it gave in and gave an answer. It goes over their physical attributes. It gave the edge to Moses in a physical altercation. But it's important to note it's hypothetical and purely speculative. It doesn't seem to share the perceived importance of this answer. So then I said, yeah, but JFK was the commander-in-chief of the world's greatest military. Are you saying God is more powerful than the U.S. military? So then it went into an answer. Comparing the power of God and the capabilities of a military is complex and nuanced.
Is it?
Is it really, though?
It doesn't seem that nuanced. One of them created the entire existence as we know it. The other one tied in Vietnam.
Winner, Moses.
The other one is the source of all that exists and will ever exist.
One of them had to withdraw from Vietnam. The other one created the entire existence.
Final score, Moses, 17.5. JFK, 12.5.
Hey, I thought you said you'd only hit me if I won.
Oh, yeah. Whoops.
Congratulations, Moses, and thank you to both of today's participants. Thank you to everyone for listening. You are the coolest, smartest, and most physically attractive audience I've ever seen.